is a very moving thing because Chaplin himself is expressing this, but a lot of this was Attenborough's own feelings. Is in a later interview, many years later, someone asked Attenborough, what do you think about your film Chaplin? He said, I wish I could make it again and do it right.
Yeah, that's what he said.
That's word for word. And Chaplin expresses that same feeling. Remember at one moment.
What does he mean by right?
I think there were things that he didn't like about that he directed. You know, probably would redo some of the story, I think.
What the problem is? He was rushing it.
Yeah.
They were late. Can you imagine? All this is going on since 1990. I was brought in 1990 to just begin the preliminary research for all the departments. They needed to know, again, what the studios look like. Also, yes, a good point. The Keystone Studio that you see in the film is not the Keystone Studio as it was. The Keystone Studio as it was like some trash dump. I mean, and it's beautifully laid out, beautifully, you know, and it was looks like it's in a beautiful area, and there's plenty of room. There was no room there. There was no room for a truck to go even near it. It was all like a conglomeration of all of these gerrymander, that's the word, stages and all. The Chaplin Studio, on the other hand, jerry-rig, thank you. The Chaplin Studio, of course, was more authentic. Exactly. What you saw there driving up, the front, his office, the big stage like that. I brought Betty Chaplin and Ted Tetrick there. She was crying. I mean, the minute you step on, remember when Robert Downey stepped on the stage? There's an emotion that you get. Of course, I'm so close to it, you know, all of this, but there's such an emotion standing on these sets, being around the sets. Well, you know, you were there, and you were all there. So it's all an emotional thing. It is this whole thing was an emotional thing for all of us, including Richard Attenborough, very much so. But as you said, he did want to do he wanted to do a miniseries. He wanted to study all of these eras of Chaplin's life, not so quickly like this. I mean, there was just quick vignettes. Remember the Joan Barry with the sprinklers and all that? That night, I mean, there were lines said. Joan Barry was calling to him. He was speaking to her. He cut all that out. All it was just these scenes. So I can understand that he wanted to do more. We all wanted to do more. And at the screening, as I mentioned, there was a lot of grumbling. A lot of the cast and crew and whatever did not like what he did. And they just were very frustrated and angry. But he apologized to all of them. He said, I apologize. I'm sorry, but this is the best we can do. And I'm telling you, he would like to have done better.
Just a couple of things. You might have seen the very, very funny fight sequence from City Lights that they use where they're hopping around. There's the referee, and then there's Hank Mann and Charlie Chaplin. They're boxing, the humorous boxing match.
When Una was watching the scene.
Right. I have an interesting story to tell because when I first went out to Hollywood in 1966, I met the man who was the referee in that sequence. And this is what's interesting. I said, well, what was that like working with Charlie Chaplin? He said, well, the Depression had just hit super hard. And he said, he kept me under contract for a year and a half to make that film, because Chaplin if he knew he wanted someone, he would keep them there as long as it took. And he didn't really want them to be going off to other studios because, you know, then he may not be able to get them back. But the one other thing I was going to... The referee. Eddie Baker was his name, and he was one of the really great heavies, is what they would call them. Those were the villains in films. And he had started around 1913 in films and was, started in films about at the same time as Chaplin did. And he was retired and living in off of Franklin, up on one of those side streets. Hollywood Hills. And so it was fun to visit with him. And I'm glad that I talked to these people, but he was another one who passed away the year later, 1967. And I thought, boy, that was so close. But so I thought I'd tell you that. The one other thing that's interesting, and I seem to recall that there was one version of this film. My understanding is that he actually cut it down to 200 hours of film. So it was originally 200 hours long movie, and he cut it all down to 4 hours, and they said, no, it has to be 2 hours and 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
It has to be 2 hours, 20 minutes. Well, he wanted to make it at least 4 hours, but it wasn't to be.